I'm your guest this morning because many years ago, before most of you were born, I dreamed the impossible dream. I wanted to fight the unbeatable fight. I wanted to bear the unbearable burdens. I wanted to run where the brave dare not go. That was my quest, to discover who I was, who I could become, and what I could bring to the world that surrounded me. But my world was different. I was born in the Mississippi Delta during the height of legal segregation. It was at a time when opportunities were limited and circumstances that would define my life would not have me as your guest today. But I dreamed. I imagined. Your theme is to reimagine education. We can't reimagine without use of our imagination. This incredible gift that will allow us to make things happen within our heads, within our hearts, and then live to see them lived out in our presence. I'm delighted to be here today, just to share with you what I have come to understand is perhaps the greatest gift that we can give each other. And it is the power of our presence. The power of our presence. Not just your academic acumen, what you have accomplished professionally, but your presence. The power of your presence on the life of another person. For you see, I dreamed that dream, that impossible dream. But it didn't matter because I dreamed. I would not be able to make that dream become real without people like you. So you're important to every child's dream. For the 3 million students that cross your path in the charter schools, for the 57 million students that travel the K-12 corridor in our country, your presence matters. Your presence makes a difference. Your presence can take you from where you dream to where you want to be. You see, as a kid, sitting on my grandpa's front porch, with my knees pulled up to my chin, I would look as far as I could. And all I could see were the cotton fields of the Delta. For that had been the world of my parents, my grandparents, my great-grandparents, and my great-great-grandparents. The cotton fields of the Mississippi Delta had been our world. And it was in that world that seemed to have been designed with impermeable ink that I dreamed. I dreamed. I imagined a world that could be. So while sitting on my grandpa's front steps, by myself, looking across the fields, I could hear the screen door open. And this is what every child needs to know, that someone has the ability to open the screen door, to walk out on the front porch and tell the child, I want to take you to Greenville. You see, when I was a kid, Greenville, Mississippi was the Queen City of the Delta. The Chicago Tribune did a story on me several years ago, and they said for young Clifton Taulbert to go to Greenville, Mississippi was tantamount to taking the Concorde to Paris, France. It was only 26 miles away, but I didn't get there very often because my grandpa had things to do. But when unselfishness defines our walk, and when unselfishness drives our behavior, and when unselfishness writes the daily order of our lives, you can open the screen door, you can tell a child, I'll take you to another place. I'll take you to Greenville. Well, 50 years later, I crossed 46th Street in New York City. Have you ever been on 46th Street in New York? You don't even have to move. They move you. You know, I'm walking. I got on my best suit. And I'm just standing outside the hotel, and I'm walking across the lanes of traffic. But I'm watching all the people gathered around me. They're moving me, and we're going somewhere. But are they going where I'm going? I'm not sure, but I'm moving with them. We're just getting there. The hot dogs can be smelled. Everything is there. The people are there, tons of people. The world has gathered just to welcome me to 46th Street. That's what I'm telling myself. But I'm on my way, guys, to the United Nations. You see, when my grandfather opened the front door to take me to Greenville, he did more than take me to a town that was called the Queen City of the Delta. He left me with the notion that I mattered. And you see, every child has to understand that they matter to you, thus the value of your presence. Yes, I'm in New York City now. I'm walking across 46th Street to the United Nations, for that is where I will speak. The same kid who grew up in the cotton fields of the Delta. As I walk through the multiple layers of security, finally making my way to the outside of the Assembly Hall, where the world had gathered entrepreneurs and innovators from around the world. I walked into the Assembly Hall. As it stands there, empty at the time, I finally looked for someone who looked professional, that could tell me what my next step was, what was expected of me. So I introduced myself. I said, my name is Clifton Taulbert, and I'm going to be one of the speakers tonight. Well, you see, they had invited me to the United Nations to speak about innovation, to speak about entrepreneurship, because our company had been involved in bringing Stairmaster exercise systems to market. I had written 14 books. I had lectured at the United States Supreme Court. I had taught at Harvard as a guest professor for 5 years. I had taught at the United States Air Force Academy. All of these things I had done not because I was so brilliant, but because I had been a beneficiary of the presence of ordinary people who became extraordinary leaders. I had become the entrepreneurial thinker, looking at my life from a different perspective, expecting more, getting more, achieving more. And to receive that note from the State Department, would you be willing to autograph a book to Nelson Mandela? I mean, they even asked me that. Can you imagine being asked that question? What are you going to say? Yes. And then you take 10 books trying to make sure that your name is spelled correctly, and you send it up to Washington. You don't hear anything at all. Did they get it? I don't know. 4 years later, my wife Barbara and I hosted a dinner in our home for lawyers from around the country, including Pretoria, South Africa. And when the South African lawyer walked into our home, she didn't even speak. She simply said, Mr. Taulbert, we know of your work in Pretoria. The president keeps the book on his desk. For a guy who listened for the screen door, and this is what I want you to understand. Of the 60 million young men and women on the K-12 corridor, all of them, regardless of circumstances, they're waiting for someone to open the screen door. They're waiting for someone to say, I'll take you to another place. Because once that becomes part of your thinking, once you understand that you can move beyond this place to that place and accomplish that, once you understand that great things are expected of you and there will be those who will walk with you to help you accomplish those things, then you're on your way to a journey to fulfill your life's goals and ambitions. So what is our end game? Why do we volunteer? Because you have volunteered to be part of the charter school movement. No arms were twisted. No one came to your house at night and said you had to do this. You have volunteered to be involved in the lives of 3 million students. You are volunteers. That's what you are. And as a volunteer, unselfishness is the one gift that will literally bring about the sustainability that is so important. So as I went into my speech at the United Nations, standing there, getting my seat assignment, looking at the crowd of people that were there gathering from around the country and around the world, I remembered community. You see, they remembered what I had done. That's why they invited me. They remembered all the things that perhaps I had accomplished in my life. That is why I was there. But while standing there watching the room fill, I remembered community. I remembered the ordinary people from the Mississippi Delta who made a difference in my life. I remembered the 8 habits of their hearts. I remembered the unselfishness that drove their every action. Men and women with little opportunity to make their dreams come true. All of a sudden, I became their envoy. I became their ambassador. I became the person that they would invest their tomorrow in. And I knew that night when I was standing in the United Nations Assembly Hall, I was not there for Clifton. I was there for my great-grandparents. That's Joe and Pearl Young. That's the man who opened the screen door for me. And I would learn that it was open because of a nurturing attitude, the first habit of the heart. That is what I want to give you as a gift. Nurturing attitude. 24/7. How do you have that gift to give? I want to leave you responsibility, the second habit of the heart. Responsibility is this ability to take the task of life and arrange them in such a way that the young people who cross your path have a clear understanding of what is expected of them and what the outcome can become. I want to also leave you dependability, the third habit of the heart. Dependability. Dependability is the habit of giving your word, keeping your word, saying what you mean, meaning what you say. This is my great aunt who raised me, determined that I would get an education. I had to travel 100 miles round trip to school every single day because of legal segregation. I never missed a day out of school. I graduated valedictorian of my class. I'm a member of Phi Beta Kappa. I have taught literally in colleges and universities around the world. Not because I was the bright guy, because of the power of the presence of others in my life. That is why I'm telling you today to embrace the power of your presence. Not just your academic acumen, but the power of your presence. Embrace the idea of unselfishness, walking on 2 legs, 2 arms, a mouth, a head, a hand, a heart to give to the kids. That is what makes the difference. That is what makes the difference, these habits of the heart. This is my first grade teacher, Miss Mary Maxey. I will never forget her because I didn't want to go to school. I had a great home, a great life. I could eat all day long. I could play all day long. So why do I want to give that up and go to school where there are rules and regulations? But when Miss Mary Maxey walks up to you and she looks at you with tears running down your face, you don't want to go to school, and your great-grandmother's telling her, this is my boy. I want you to make something out of him. And Miss Maxey simply looks at me and says, little professor, welcome to Moore's Elementary School. Welcome to your school. This is where you will be seated. This is where you will learn. These are the people you will play with. These are the things you will do. This is what I planned for you, because she had planned that I would be successful. And I walked into that success expectation. And because of that, I'm your guest today. Growing up in the segregated world where racism was rampant, I want you to meet a lady that was my boss. I raked fig leaves for Mrs. Knight. And I remember the first day that I went to her home. She lived in not a palatial home, but a very nice home on Lake Washington. And she told me that she wanted her yard to look like a carpet. She had fig trees. And if you've ever raked fig trees, you will understand that fig leaves do not do what you tell them to do. They hug the grass. So around 11:30, I got hungry, but my great aunt said to me, you don't have to take any lunch, you can eat when you come home. Okay, so that's fine. Mrs. Knight comes out of her shop. Clifton, come on, it's time for us to go and eat lunch. I'm just a young guy, but I've been taught to be colored. So I know the rules and regulations of legal segregation. She didn't mean what she said. She said us. Us. When I count to 3, I want this whole audience to say us. 1, 2, 3. That's the word that changes so much. When we can look beyond me and I and say us, let us go and eat lunch. And I remember headed to the kitchen door. She said, no, come on, follow me. So we walked through her front room, sat at her dining room table, and in the course of eating our meal, which was baked chicken, lima beans, light bread, and sweet milk, she said, Clifton, what books are you reading? Now, this is important because I was hired not to be a student at her house. I was hired to make her yard look like a carpet. So rather than ask me about fertilizer or what was happening to the leaves, what books are you reading? And this is the type of expectation I would want you to have for every student, regardless of their zip code, from where they have come. I want you to have that idea that these students are really among the best on the planet, and you want to know what books are you reading, because she understood the power of the written word. And I told her the books that I was reading, and she had what we call a Mississippi hissy fit. She went, oh, you can't read those books. You have to read books from the library. I said, Mrs. Knight, I can't go to the library. For you see, when I needed the library was not open to me. So I simply said, I can't go. And silence fell over the room. Everything was quiet. We finished our meal. I went back to work. The next week when I came, placed by my silverware china was a stack of books, the classics from the library. Not just one time, until I graduated from high school, I had this opportunity to read the best of books. Ordinary people becoming extraordinary leaders. That's the habit of the heart that we call brotherhood and sisterhood. The habit that gives us that desire to stretch our table, to make sure that other people are there. The habit of the heart, high expectations. That is what they had for me. I didn't know it at the time. I didn't know the word high expectation. But the old African would come into our community, a stutterer. And he would come to Glen Allen, we'll be shooting marbles, and he would say to my grandpa, hey, young, let me tell you something now. I got to read to these boys. And Emily Dickinson perhaps said it best. There is no frigate like a book to take you to shores you have never been, to places you have never gone, and to people you have not known. And there we sat on the dirt, on the steps, as this old man read to us in his stuttering voices from the books he had scavenged from homes where he worked. And before leaving, he would come and put his hands on every child's head and tell my grandpa, young, I tell you, now you take my word for it now. Every last one of these boys, they're all marked for good. Marked for good. The habits of the heart, high expectation, courage, and hope. This is my mom, the epitome of those two habits. I was not raised by my mother. My mother was a maid most of her life. She made $12 a week. 4 girls and 2 boys. But she was determined that every one of us would get an education. And at some point, my mom, I don't know exactly what happened, but she was convinced by others that she didn't have to wash, cook, and clean for others anymore. Mary, why don't you go to school? Why don't you go back to school? Because she had gone to college for 1 semester. My mom went back to school at the University of Alabama at Tuscaloosa. She didn't even have the clothes to wear. She borrowed clothes from a friend in Chicago who sent her a box of used clothes. She hitchhiked to Tuscaloosa. She became an A student and one of the founders of Head Start in the Mississippi Delta. An incredible lady. And as I come to a close, I'm lecturing at New York University. and I'm talking to the chancellor from Bergen Community College. And the chancellor asked me, "Do you know a lady by the name of Mary Morgan Taulbert?" I said, "That's my mother." She said, "Do you know that all of her work, all the work she has done in the years with Head Start are stored at New York University? And we can't get our doctorate degree in social work until we read and clearly understand the work that your mother has done." So this is what I want to leave with you. Unselfishness, and to clearly understand the power of your presence. Nurturing attitude, responsibility, dependability, friendship, brotherhood, sisterhood, high expectations, courage, and hope. I wrote this book several years ago. It's made its debut at Harvard University and became an international bestseller. There are no graphs, there are no charts in the book at all. I made sure there was not one graph, not one chart. They are simple stories about ordinary people in the Mississippi Delta and how they became extraordinary leaders, impacting lives now all over the world. It is the habits of the heart which is the strength of their lives. And I'd like to read this to you. I'm going to try to do it without my glasses, but I think I cannot do it without my glasses. Now I can do it. My encounters with Renee, George, Alexander, and many others from around the world reinforce what I already knew, that my life actions are important, not only to my son who watches everything I do and hears what I say, but also to the adults that I encounter and to their daughters and sons. The habits cannot be passed along like a collection of footballs. What we are passing along are the strengths of our lives, which we embrace and make clear through daily living. This is simply all that I'm asking you to do, to understand that within each of us, there's a hand that can open the screen door, there's a heart that can embrace unselfishness, and there's a mouth that can say, "I love you." There's a mouth that can say, "I want the best for you." At the end of the day, this is what we really want: caring, productive citizens who clearly understand their role in our society. So 50 years from now, your students who will become caring, productive citizens of our country and their communities, the habits of your heart will be their conversation. Thank you very much.